check out her website, coxlawyers.com, and her Substack at attorneycoxsubstack.com. Thank you.
Everybody. I want to thank Ton for putting this all together. It was really so kind and so special. It's so fabulous to meet everybody. One silver lining about all of this insanity is that I'm getting to meet people across New York State. I never would have met any of you if this all wasn't going on. So thank you, Ton, for all of your efforts and for your insight. I also want to thank the other people here on the stage. These speakers are all really unique and powerful and wonderful in their own ways. So I want to thank Senator Borrello, and I want to thank Mayor Deb Rogers, and I don't know where he went, but I'd like to thank Assemblyman Steve Hawley, and I'd like to thank Assemblyman DiPietro for coming and showing support today. So I'm going to give a little bit of detail. I appreciate everybody here today making the effort, taking the time. I appreciate everybody that's zooming in today from different parts of New York State. I think we actually have some people from Florida and California and Texas and Washington also zooming in. So I want to thank everybody for taking the time. This information is really important, and I hope, we're about a week or so out from Election Day here in New York. So I hope everybody takes the information they hear today and shares it and spreads it like crazy over the next 10 days. Because, I know politicians say this all the time, but I'm not a politician, and I'm going to tell you this is the most important election of our lifetime, particularly here in New York State. If we can't stop the tyranny in New York State, it is going to spread like a cancer across the country, and then we're going to have no place left to run. So we need to stop it here, and I'll give a little bit of details on the quarantine facility regulation and lawsuit, and then I'll let everybody know how you can get involved and what else we can do. So in March of 2020, when Andrew Cuomo, stood on television and said, "Okay, everybody, lock down. Everybody stay home, close the schools, 2 weeks to flatten the curve." The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I was like, "Oh, no. This, first of all, it's not just going to be 2 weeks. Second of all, he doesn't have this power, right?" And then I came to realize that the New York State Legislature gave him the power, and I said, "Well, that's not constitutional." So, but there was, this is what happened, and Cuomo ran with it. It was March 3rd, as Senator Borrello said, and then within a week, Cuomo took that power and he passed it along to his Commissioner of Health. So he issued Executive Order number 202, which then gave the power to the Commissioner of Health. And what the Commissioner of Health did was issue this isolation and quarantine regulation. The regulation, for anybody that's not intimately familiar with it, the regulation could, by the way, that was illegal as well. You can't take an illegal power and pass it on to someone else. So what it said was that the Department of Health could pick and choose which New Yorkers they could lock up or lock down. They could lock you down in your home, or they could have removed you from your home and put you into a facility of their choosing, anywhere they wanted. You had no say. They could have kept you there for days, for weeks, for months. There was no restriction on time. They could have done this to you, to your child, to your grandchild, to your elderly parent. There was no restriction on age. They could have used local law enforcement to execute their orders, which means you could have gotten a knock on the door, and it could have been the local police or the sheriff saying, "I'm sorry, you need to come with me. I have a quarantine decree from the Department of Health." You couldn't negotiate your way out of it. There was nothing in this regulation that said that you could try and negotiate. "Oh, don't worry. You think I have tuberculosis? That's okay, I'll take a test. I'll prove to you I don't have tuberculosis or COVID or monkeypox or whatever else was on their list. This was not a COVID-specific agenda. So that was not permitted. There was nothing in this regulation that said that you could test your way out or negotiate your way out. And they could tell you what you could and couldn't do while you were being locked up or locked down. So if you think about that language for a minute, that's really, really broad. That's really, really scary. They could have taken your cell phone. They could have cut off your internet access. They could have told you what you could eat, when you could eat, where you could eat, how you could eat, what medications you could or couldn't take or had to take. They could have had complete control over you while you were in lockdown. So I had been, since almost March of 2020, I had been speaking out against all of the insanity. I hadn't yet heard of the quarantine regulation, but a lot of people were reaching out to me because as an attorney, you know, they wanted advice. Oh my gosh, do I have to close my business? Do I have to stay home? You know, am I gonna get a ticket? Am I gonna get arrested? Am I going to have to pay a fine if I go to work or I open my business? So people were really, really upset. People were really scared. And I saw so much suffering, and it wasn't coming from COVID. It was coming from what the government was doing to the people.
That's right.
And I said, there's no way that I can stand here and watch this happen. So I started to speak out, I started to give speeches. Freedom groups were popping up across the state, asking me to come speak, explain to them what's legal, what's not, what's constitutional, what's not. And before this, I was a property tax certiorari attorney. So I sued local government, towns, villages, cities, on behalf of my clients if I felt that their property valuation was too high, and would deal with, you know, the assessments, getting them lower to lower their property taxes if the government had overtaxed them. So I was used to dealing with government. I knew how they think and act. So I knew we were in this for a long haul. I got involved with a citizens group called Uniting New York State, and somebody in probably October, November of 2021 from Uniting New York State brought me this regulation and said, you have to read this. What is this? Is this real? And I read it and I said, it's real, unfortunately, but there's no way it's legal. So I didn't really think twice. I started drafting a lawsuit, and I had to make a really big decision because in my practice with tax certiorari, it's seasonal, and you have to file your grievances against the government in the spring, where I live, which is Westchester County. So I knew that I couldn't bring this lawsuit and do my regular tax certiorari practice because I would have to start in January, February, getting all my clients lined up and preparing all their cases so that I could file in the spring. So I said, okay, well, I guess I'm not gonna do that this year. So I put my practices to the side, and I started drafting this lawsuit. And I knew that I needed New York State legislators to come on the case because there weren't any people being pulled from their homes or forced to lock down by the Department of Health pursuant to this regulation. So I had to be creative with my standing, which just means you have the right to sue. I had to figure out an injury on how I could stop them from doing this before they started hurting people. So I said, well, the New York State Legislature is getting hurt here because their power is being taken by the governor and the Department of Health. The governor and the Department of Health the Department of Health is an agency under the governor in the executive branch. They can't make a regulation that conflicts with the Constitution. They can't make a regulation that conflicts with New York State law. We already have Section 2120 of the Public Health Law, which says, we've had it for 70 years. It says what you do if you need to remove somebody from society because they are a public health threat. And this regulation completely conflicts with that law. So and that law, just in case anybody's really nervous at hearing that we have this law, quarantine law, that law has many due process protections built into it so that the government can't abuse its power and hurt the people. Number one due process protection is that you have to actually have the disease. Whereas Kathy Hochul's regulation said you didn't actually have to have disease. They didn't have to prove anything. They could have just locked you up or locked you down upon suspicion that you were possibly exposed. So I said, okay, well, let me reach out to some New York State legislators, let me get them on board. And so I got Senator George Borrello. I was very thankful. Senator Borrello, Assemblyman Chris Tate, Assemblyman Mike Lawler decided to put their names on the lawsuit. And then we had another group of assemblymen that did an amicus brief. That was Assemblyman Andy Goodell had authored the brief, and then Assemblyman Joseph Giglio and Assemblyman Will Barkley came on that amicus brief with him. So an amicus brief is just a brief that supports a lawsuit written by someone who's not a party in the case. So it was a very powerful brief. It was wonderful, and we were off. We sued Hochul, we sued the Department of Health, we sued Dr. Mary Bassett, who's the Commissioner of Health, and we sued the Health Planning Council. The first thing that, I was kind of hoping they would read the lawsuit and say, oh gosh, sorry Bobbi Anne, we overstepped. Let us withdraw that. They did not do that. Instead, they fought us tooth and nail. So they removed my case to federal court, right? Because we filed in state Supreme Court in Cattaraugus County. And so I had to fight in federal court to get back into state court because this case had nothing to do with federal law. They were just trying to waste my time and my energy and my resources, and I had to reach out to a colleague. He's a town judge. He's also a practicing attorney, Tom Marcel, in Albany. I said, oh gosh, Tom, you know what? They removed me to federal court in a district where I'm not yet admitted. It's gonna take me weeks to get admitted to this court. And he's like, don't worry, I'm admitted in the Western District, I'll help you. And I said, well, I'm doing this pro bono, so I can't pay you. And he said, don't worry about it. He said, I'll help you. So Tom Marcel fought with me side by side in federal court, and we argued in front of the federal judge, and we won, and we got sent back to state court. That was really important because what the AG, what the Attorney General would have done was, if I had lost that and we stayed in federal court, they then would have made a motion to dismiss for lack of jurisdiction, right? So, because they had played that game with other cases in New York. So we won, and then the Attorney General tried to keep the amicus brief out of the court, and so we had to then do motion practice back and forth to fight to get the amicus brief to be entered into the court. We won that. The judge allowed the amicus brief. And then we had oral arguments in May in front of the judge. And one thing I'll just point out, one key point from the oral arguments. The judge asked the Attorney General's office, so if, let's say you take a family and you put them into quarantine. Let's say you put them into a facility or a hospital. How do they get out? And when he asked that question, I was like, oh, thank you, Lord. He understands what this is all about. And the Attorney General, there was a really pregnant pause, and then the Attorney General's office was like, well, I guess they could hire a lawyer and they could sue. So the judge said, oh, well, doesn't that take a lot of time? And that's kind of expensive, right? So I understood then that the judge got my point, right? This reg had no due process protections in it, which is unconstitutional. You have to have protections in laws and regs to protect the people. So in July, the beginning of July, the judge ruled in our favor. He struck down the regulation. He deemed it unconstitutional. He said it was a breach of separation of powers. It conflicted with existing New York State law. And one of my favorite quotes is he said it gave lip service to due process. So they said in the beginning of this regulation, in accordance with due process, we're gonna do this. We're gonna rip you out of your house and throw you into a facility. But there was no actual due process in the regulation. So I really hope that, as Senator Rello said, they did file a notice of appeal. They do intend to appeal this decision. I'm sure they're waiting until after November 8th because they don't want voters to know what they're up to.
That's right.
But if they do appeal, if Hochul wins, or if Letitia James wins her re-election as Attorney General, and the appeal goes forward, and let's say it's overturned. Let's say the appellate division, which is appointed judges, overturns the decision. It's gonna open the floodgates for agencies across, not just the state, across the nation, to do whatever they want. Because it will effectively elevate the executive branch above the legislature. It will really nullify the power of the legislature. Because if an agency can just do whatever they want, despite the fact that there's a law that they're conflicting with, and there's a constitution that they're conflicting with, that puts them up above the other two branches of government, and then we're in big trouble, because that's tyranny. That's tyranny. Then there's nothing stopping them from doing whatever they want to do. So this is a crucial election. And I really hope everybody here and everybody on this Zoom live stream takes this information, shares it, and bring people to the polls with you on November 8th. Don't just go alone. Bring your family, bring your friends, and tell people what's at stake. There's a website, unitingnys.com/lawsuit, and it has all the information about the lawsuit. You can link to the judge's decision, you can read the regulation. We have pictures there from we did a press conference in Albany when we launched the lawsuit in April. The video from that press conference is on the website. There are flyers on the website you can download, you can post on your social media or hand them out to your friends. People need to hear what's going on, because it is crucial that we change the leadership at the top. I'm happy to keep fighting for the people. I'm proud that I could defend 19 million New Yorkers with this lawsuit. However, I can't keep doing it by myself. I need the people to stand up and take your power back. And the way you do that is to vote these people out of office and make sure you keep in place people like Senator George Borrello, Assemblyman DiPietro, Assemblyman Hawley, Andy Goodell, Joseph Giglio, Will Barkley, and Lawler's running for Congress, so let's vote him into Congress, right? And Assemblyman Chris Teague. So we need people like that. These are the people that are standing with us, shoulder to shoulder. They are standing up for our rights, and they're standing up for the Constitution. And I'm just gonna end by reminding everybody something that I think a lot of people have lost sight of this over the last couple years, because the government has gone so far astray, particularly in New York. The Constitution was written to keep the government in check. The Constitution wasn't written to keep the people in check. Okay, so our rights are protected in the Constitution. It's not a perfect document, but it is brilliant. And it's brilliant because it was written by our founding fathers who came from tyranny. Okay, they were under a king that didn't care anything about what they thought, what they needed, what they felt, what their life was like in the colonies. They were so sick and tired of it, they said, we got to break free, we got to start a new country. And they did, and they wrote this Constitution with that in mind. We have to write this thing so that we'll never see this happen in our new country ever again. But here we are, 250 years later, and we're fighting tyranny. So we have to preserve the Constitution. We have to preserve the Constitution. The far left wants to destroy it, wants to throw it out and rewrite, some sort of monarchy type, papers. We can't allow the Constitution to die. It is crucial. So please, everybody, you can talk to people, email people, call people, post on your social media, go to events like this. We have flyers in the back at the table that Uniting New York State made up. I have a Substack now. It's free. You can go on Substack, attorneycox.substack.com. Free articles, information about not just the quarantine facility regulation and lawsuit, but other things going on in New York State. There are horrific bills in the legislature right now, you know, not proposed by these gentlemen up here, but horrific bills in the legislature right now that want to extinguish parental rights. And I'm not even exaggerating a little bit. Check out my Substack. I have articles written about it. We have to change the leadership, or we're going to be in for 4 years of really bad times. So thank everybody so much for coming today. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules and sharing the afternoon with me. I just, if we're gonna do a Q&A question and answer afterwards, but I just hope that everybody here knows it's time for everybody to stand up and do something. You don't have to, you don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to be an army of people. You know, I was one person that started this journey to strike down an unconstitutional regulation. I was one person by myself. I had no support. When I tell you I had no support, I had no support. I reached out to other colleagues, they didn't want to hear it. I reached out to many colleagues, they didn't want to hear it. Why are you doing this? You're gonna lose your career, you're gonna ruin your career, you're gonna lose all your clients. You've worked 25 years to build up your practice. If you're gonna throw it all away, you're never gonna beat the governor. This is crazy. What you're doing at pro bono, what are you doing? You're crazy. Wouldn't help me, and some of them wouldn't even, you know, discuss the topic. So one person can make a difference, and everybody needs to try. And you will find allies along the way, right? The people on this stage are key in this fight. You will find allies along the way. Courage is contagious, so please help me be courageous. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you.